What were you wanting to do when you ran for county commissioner?
Well, there was two primary things. One was trash, solid waste. I felt the system was broken. We had a decal system. I called it the restricted access to where you need to put your trash.
Right.
And I wanted to change that system, and it is changing now. Finally, it's taken me all this time. I was on the short end of a couple of 6-to-1 votes, but kept plodding away, and I think people have realized that we need to fix it. The other thing was just fiscal responsibility. I've always been a little to the right of Jesse Helms. Some have accused me, but I'm very conservative. I've always wanted to save taxpayers money, but I understand the county's growing. We've got to provide services. People expect those services, but I'd like to see it done in a way that's not a waste of taxpayers' money. Too often, when somebody's not spending their own money, they get a little overboard.
Welcome to another episode of Best of Johnston County, brought to you by Breeden Law Office. Our host, Jonathan Breeden, an experienced family lawyer with a deep connection to the community, is ready to take you on a journey through the area that he has called home for over 20 years. Whether it's a deep dive into the love locals have for the county or unraveling the complexities of family law, Best of Johnston County presents an authentic slice of this unique community.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Best of Johnston County podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Breeden, and today we have a special guest with us, County Commissioner Ted Godwin. Welcome, Ted.
Glad to be here, Jonathan.
Golly, we've known each other for basically the whole 23 years I've been living here in Johnston County. You've lived in Johnston County a lot longer than that, but you were particularly your wife, were one of some of the first people I met when I came here many years ago. She was working at Four Oaks Bank and was sort of my banker who helped me get a lot of this stuff set up out here at 4042 when I came here in October of 2000 and met you shortly thereafter. And I think you were in banking as well.
That's right, I'm retired.
Long before you got into being the politics of it. So I guess for some of our listeners, a lot of people that listen to this are new to Johnston County and might not know Ted Godwin, everything you do. Just tell me where you from, where'd you grow up? Just
Sure.
sort of a biographical background.
I was born and raised in Johnston County in the Glendale community over near Kinley. Went to high school, the old Glendale High School. It consolidated. We were the first consolidation in 1965. I was a junior at North Johnston, second graduating class. Went to NC State. Didn't quite finish the degree because Uncle Sam was interested in me.
Okay.
So I spent some time in the military. Came back, went to school in engineering, but wound up going into banking and was a banker for 42 years.
Man, you were with KS Bank?
I started out with First Union Wilson. From there, I got moved to Southern Pines. That's where I met Donna.
Okay.
From there to Newbern, and then back here almost 30 years ago.
Oh, my goodness. How about that? So, and then y'all had some children?
Yeah, we've got 3 boys.
Right. And
they're all grown.
They're all grown now.
5 grandkids.
Oh, my goodness. Do your boys still live in Johnston County?
Yes, one of them has already graduated. He's a dentist. He's living in the western part of the state.
Oh, cool.
My granddaughter has just graduated from East Carolina. The little boys, I call them, they're 2 8th graders and a 6th grader, and one's at the Innovation Academy and the other 2 at North Johnston Middle.
Okay, so you still have a lot of skin in the game with your grandchildren in the public schools in Johnston
County. I even pulled the chains at the middle school football game this year.
Oh, I tell you what, that's awesome. So I guess when did you decide, I guess before you became a commissioner, you were pretty involved in varying community activities. You and I did some volunteer work together. What were some of those things you did, before we get into when you actually became a commissioner?
Well, I've always been involved. My dad was involved in community development years ago, back in the 50s and 60s. He started Boy Scout troop and Little League, that sort of thing. But I guess it's in my blood. But I've always been involved in local civic clubs, Kiwanis or Rotary. I was a Rotarian for over 30 years. And near the end of my banking career, my boss man and a couple of important people I thought here in Johnston County urged me to run for commissioner. And there were several issues on my plate that I wanted to address, and I did. I ran and got soundly defeated that first year.
Yeah, when was that?
That was in 2008.
2008, right. I remember that campaign. And,
I was running against an incumbent, and he was a good guy, and I had nothing against him, but we were in the same district, and so I ran and got defeated, but I got my feet wet and got to know a little bit about what was going on. And so I ran unopposed in 2012, and I did have opposition in 16 and 20. I thought I would hang it up, but there's still some things I need to see through.
Right, because, you've been on there now. This is your 12th year as a commissioner. You're coming to the end of your third 4-year term.
Right.
And I know you filed for re-election. There's going to be a primary on March the 5th of 2024 in just a few weeks. This primary is going to be coming up, and you're going to be asking for the voters to give you another 4-year term.
Right.
And there's no Democrat in the race, so the winner of the primary is going to win the race, and that's how it is often in Johnston County with local elections. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's just where it is right now in Johnston County. And we'll let the listeners decide whether they think that's a good thing or a bad thing. But unfortunately, we don't have two parties in this county that are very active. So the primaries is where it's at. But people have different opinions even within the Republican Party as to what should happen. So what were those things you wanted to do when you first run in 2008? I remember because I remember you working on the campaign. I talked to you during that campaign. But just tell the people that weren't here then, what were you wanting to do when you ran for county commissioner?
Well, there was two primary things. One was trash, solid waste. I felt the system was broken. We had a decal system. I called it the restricted access to where you need to put your trash.
Right.
And I wanted to change that system. And it is changing now. Finally, it's taken me all this time. I was on the short end of a couple of 6-1 votes, but kept plodding away. And I think people have realized that we need to fix it. The other thing was just fiscal responsibility. I've always been a little to the right of Jesse Helms. Some have accused me, but I'm very conservative. I've always wanted to save taxpayers money, but understand the county's growing. We've got to provide services. People expect those services, but I'd like to see it done in a way that's not a waste of taxpayers' money. Too often, when somebody's not spending their own money, they get a little overboard.
Right. No, you're right about that. And so tell the listeners a little bit about how the new trash decal system is going to work. I went to the solid waste site on Barber Mill the other day, and I didn't have a decal, and I had some old picture frames, and they're like, you're going to have to go to the dump itself because you don't have a decal, and that doesn't qualify as recycling here.
Right.
So I drove to Smithfield to the dump and put the picture frames into the being at the dump, and they didn't even charge me the $5, which was very nice of the lady at the dump. She's like, you got 3 picture frames. I'll let you just do it. But
that's very inefficient. We need to do better than that. In other counties I had seen where my son, when he was in college in Pitt County, they didn't have the restricted access. And I have some land in another county in the western part of the state, and it's just a line item on my tax bill.
Right.
And I thought, well, that's maybe the best way to do it. I equate it to education. I've had kids in the school system. I don't have any now, but I still pay taxes. That's the biggest part of my tax dollar is for education.
Right.
The county's better off to have a good education system.
Right.
I think the county's better off to have a good trash system.
Right.
And people say, well, I live in town. We haven't worked out the details yet, but the people in town won't pay the same thing that I'll pay out in the county. And the other thing is people that pay to have someone pick up their trash, they don't use the convenience site. So it's a non-issue. But that's like sending your kid to private school. It's your option.
Correct.
You still got to pay your school
Correct.
taxes even when you do that.
Correct. Well, and I have Anchor Disposal, which is a good Johnston County based business right out here. They're based right here at 4042. They pick up the trash at my house. I know there are plenty of private trash haulers out here as well. So, but my understanding is the convenience sites are going to be open to everybody. And what is the go live date on that?
We're not sure on that.
Okay.
Well, I'll take that back. After July 1, there won't be any decals. So you might say that's the go live date.
Okay. All right.
And obviously, when more people are bringing trash, someone raised the question one time, says, well, you're going to get a lot more trash then. I said, wow. Think about that. That's what we want. We want the trash where it belongs.
Correct.
And we'll have to expand some sites and look at maybe we don't want to create a bottleneck or anything like that.
Right. Yeah, and I know that they're kind of landlocked there at the one on Barber Mill, which is where I go. And you don't have to have a decal even now for the listeners if you want to recycle metals or TVs or computers or anything like that. The recycling is included. You just can't drop off general waste. And so that same day that they sent me to the dump with the picture frames that they determined was general waste, I was able to drop off some cardboard boxes and some scrap metal that we did that was at my house. But I still had to go to the thing. But I'll be happy to see that's going to be good. And hopefully the lady that won't say the lane next to the one next to Barber Mill at some point will do that, because I know that site definitely needs to be expanded, and that's the one that
I think we're moving forward on that.
Yeah, well that's great. That's great. And of course now people that listen is Johnston County is very blessed that we have a landfill that has still got almost 99 years of active use about it. So, we don't have a landfill capacity problem they have in some other areas. Right. They're having a mess in Fayetteville right now. If you want to Google about that, because they need a new one. And where do you want to put it? Nobody wants a landfill.
Not in my backyard.
No, we're very fortunate in Johnston County to have the landfill we have and the solid waste team we have. And our convenience centers are nice. The people that work there are extremely helpful. And the people at the dump, the few times I've been there, have been very helpful too. So yeah. I think we've done a pretty good job with that. We've done a lot. I mean, I'm a big fan of the county commissioners in this county. Y'all could go back and listen to Patrick Harris was on a few weeks ago, his thing. I think y'all really done a good job. I always talk about what a good job I think Rick Hester has done as the county manager. We had Adrian O'Neill on a few weeks ago with the Parks Department, and bringing him on and everything he's trying to do, I think has been really good. Let's talk a little bit about the budget. People don't know a ton about their county budget. The county budget is now more than $200 million.
More than $300 million.
More than $300 million.
Yeah, it was about $350 million this year. We dropped the tax rate by 4 cents because of the growth. It afforded us that opportunity to do that. And obviously, it's the taxpayers' money, and we have to be fiscally responsible with that money. But we've got a lot of things going on in such a growing county. We've just finished I don't want to say jail, the detention center.
Right.
And it's a very nice facility without being overboard. I cautioned them about that. We don't need a Taj Mahal. We just need something functional and efficient and appropriate.
Right.
And we're fixing to go live with the 911 center being moved out to the public safety center adjacent to the detention center. We have a strong need for DSS building.
Yes.
That's something we're looking at right now. That's the next thing on the agenda, really. And of course, the big thing we're dealing with on our agenda, don't want to get away from the budget, but is the land use plan.
Right.
If I run into people out in the county, the biggest complaint I hear is growth.
Right.
How do you slow growth? How do you stop growth?
Right.
I grew up here. I used to play baseball at the old Cleveland High School here when there was nothing around there.
Right.
So I've seen a big change. And I would love to see it change back to what it was. That'll never happen. I'd love to see growth slow down. Some people say if you're not growing, you're dying. I'm not sure I buy into that. I think you can grow without getting bigger, get better.
Right.
The land use plan, the way it's laid out, is a very good plan if we properly translate that into meaningful ordinances that can make it work.
Right.
That plan, if you've looked at it, pushes density towards the towns.
Correct.
Allows them to grow, retains as much open space as possible.
Right.
But a lot of people have a misconception that why don't you just stop allowing subdivisions? Well, the number one political philosophy I have is freedom. And when someone's got a piece of land, I can't go tell him that he can't build a house on his land. Now, we can put in some parameters that if you're going to turn that tobacco field into houses, we can control the density because it impacts the infrastructure, the water, sewer, if there's sewer, the traffic, the highways.
Right.
All of those things, it becomes a community issue then and not a private property owner situation.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And I think people, being a lawyer and knowing how these ordinances work and how zoning works, if somebody comes with a plan and it meets the zoning and the ordinance requirements, you can't really vote it down or they're going to sue you.
That's right. And they'll win.
And they're going to win. Go ask the town of Smithfield about that. I mean, they have been sued multiple times in the last couple of years, and they have lost every single time and have spent a lot of money of the Smithfield citizens' taxes defending lawsuits where they lost. The last one they lost was over whether there could be an RV park on the backside of the outlets that backed up to a neighborhood over near Triple S High School. Yeah. And they lost that one. And so it is difficult. And so I think people just think, well, the commissioner should just not approve any subdivisions. Well, that's not legal and that's not realistic.
That's right.
And people have the right to live where they want to live, and people want to live in Johnston County. And to me, that's a good thing. I mean, I'm glad people want to live here. And I think the commissioners and the citizens of this county have made it a place where people do want to live.
Yeah, we've had so many things on our plate to deal with. A lot of people don't even realize it's a big deal to us to get a AAA bond rating. Since 1999, the county has experienced 8 upgrades in our bond rating. Why is that important? We borrow a lot of money because we build a lot of schools because of the growth. And when you borrow money, that AAA bond rating is important. We've saved
Yes.
millions and millions of dollars in interest cost because of that bond rating.
Right.
And the most recent one we put forward for the school system was, I think it was 20 or 30 million that we sold, and we got that AAA bond rating finally.
Right. And I know the commissioners had been working on that for over 20 years.
Yeah.
They had been working on trying to get a AAA bond rating, and that allows you to borrow money as cheaply as possible.
That's
because
right.
It's telling the investors who are buying the bonds that this is a well-run county. It is going to pay its bills. It's almost like having an 800 credit score.
Yeah.
For, if you're a citizen, sort of that's considered a
That's
perfect
right.
credit score. And if you can get a AAA bond rating, it's telling the investors in these bonds that you can trust this county is going to make its payments, and that's a good investment.
One of the things that has kept us from getting that in times past was one of the things that was really hard to change. The metric was the average family income in the county. And that's hard to change over a period of time. And through the efforts of our Economic Development Office, Chris Johnston has done a great job.
Yes.
And the commissioners creating a business-friendly environment. Since 2014, 2015, we've added not millions, but billions of dollars in economic growth, jobs, high-paying jobs. And there'll be more to come in the future. They haven't been announced yet. And that has really afforded us the opportunity to get that triple bond rating.
Well, and the commissioners have been, and I was fortunate to spend 2 years on the Economic Development Committee of the county, that the commissioners put me on that committee, and I was on that from 20 to 2022. And we worked on the incentives and sort of the tax incentives that help recruit the business. And I worked with Chris Johnson. And I think the commissioners put me on there because I kept complaining about these tax kickbacks that they were giving. And I think they were like, I think the commissioners are like, well, you keep complaining about it. We'll put you on there and let you actually learn and see who we're competing with and what we have to do. And now I don't give them a hard time anymore. And I think I think they're happy. That was the best commission vote they ever made.
The people need to understand that we're not giving anything away. We're just the competitive aspect requires that we do this. But when someone pays us $1 in taxes and we give them back as part of this incentive 90 cents that first year, well, we're still getting 10 cents that we didn't have.
Right.
And after a few years, we'll be getting the whole dollar and keeping it. So we're not giving away anything from the coffers. It's their own money.
Well, and we've been fortunate that we've been able to get some of the investment we have. You had the Novo Nordisk expansion that is now up and running, 95 acres under roof, over $2 billion in just the expansion. That, to give y'all an idea of what that is, that at the time that Novo did that was the largest single private investment in the history of North Carolina.
That's right.
And it really added to the tax base for the county without sending people to school. And it doesn't need food stamps and welfare services and DSS services. And that's where commercial is so important. And it added a lot of jobs that are paying an average of around $70,000, which is really good money. And they're talking about building another plant now that they're going to maybe close that road that where it goes through there, Powhatan, and be able to connect both sides of their thing. And they brought an entire line from Germany, I think, there. So, that's a huge thing for Johnston County. Griffles has been expanding. They've gone across the railroad tracks now. They're doing a tremendous job. These are high-paying jobs that are good for the county, good for our citizens. These are good products. They're making life-saving products right here with our citizens.
And there's other things happening, not only in that hub around Clayton, but down towards Four Oaks and over, of course, in Selma. A lot of things are happening there. The Workforce Development Center that the commissioners helped bring into being 25 years ago has been wonderful as far as Griffles and Novo, and the pharmaceutical campus is there. But we're just starting another similar product, but it's high-tech manufacturing training center in Four Oaks.
In Four Oaks, that's right. In the old Four Oaks Bank buildings.
Well,
that general area, I guess.
Actually, it's right near the ramp going off of 95 there at Four Oaks.
Right, okay.
They've got some land, and we've gotten a grant from the state. The county's putting up some money. We're going to build something similar to the Workforce Development Center in Clayton. But it'll be tailored towards high-end, high-tech manufacturing.
Right. That I had read about that. That's really good. And then they're building a bunch of new warehouse flex space down around Benson, right near I-95 and 40. That's coming there. We've got some brand new industrial flex space here, right here at 4042 on 42 that's just getting finished. That's going to allow some small businesses that need industrial flex space to come here, and we're excited about that. It's also got some out parcels, and that's going to add jobs to Johnston County as well. And when we had, if you go back to episode 1, we had Paul Flaherty with HCR Commercial, and we talked a little bit. The Copper District is coming to Clayton, and that's going to be basically something that looks like North Hills. Right there in Clayton on Highway 42. I mean, you're talking about transformative projects, Yeah,
you're talking about what they refer to as Class A office space. And that's
correct.
High-end stuff.
Right. And it's going to have, and I think it's going to have some industrial in the back, and it's going to have, it's a little bit like North Hills Riverwood. There's going to be places to live, retail below, townhouses above, maybe a 10-story building. We'll see if they stick with that. But I mean, it's going to be, I think it's going to be, I don't know. I'm excited. I find this fascinating. I know a lot of people are like all this growth, but like jobs and investment and giving places for our citizens to work, I think it's great.
I've served on the interstate. Well, now we call it the Interstate 42 Highway 70 Corridor Commission for several years now, and that's a consortium of counties between here and Carteret County. Really has to do with Eastern North Carolina connectivity to improve economic development. But we're one of the few counties that's got 3 interstates going right here through where we are.
Right. Well, right, because we have the 2 of the biggest interstates in the entire country intersect right here in Benson. And then we're getting this new interstate, 42, that they'll be building over the next 20 or 30 years. And that's going to add economic development too, because it's going to make it easier to get products from the ports into the center of the state, and those are going to come through Johnston County as well.
The good thing about Johnston County, we've had all of this growth and all of these things going on. I can still get on my bicycle and ride 25 miles in the country roads near where I live and meet 2 cars.
Right, that's excellent.
Have family law questions? Need guidance to navigate legal challenges? The compassionate team at Breeden Law Office is here to help. Visit us at www.breedenfirm.com for practical advice, resources, or to book a consultation. Remember, when life gets messy, you don't have to face it alone.
Let's talk a little bit about the park. Listeners that listen to this, if you listen to the episode with Adrian O'Neill, the County Parks and Rec Director, the county has purchased this land here at Polenta and Government Road to build the Cleveland Community Park, it's going to be the first county park. I know you voted for that. What do you see, what do you see as a timeline? Everybody, it's $30 to $50 million to build it is the quote I've seen. What's a timeline for the citizens to see that park come into fruition?
That's a good question. And I guess it depends on how you approach it and what you get developed to start with. Obviously, we're not going to put anything out there like a SRAC the first year.
Right.
But something that would, in our studies with the feedback we've gotten from the input of citizens, the passive recreation that you would see in a park, walking trails, things for kids to do and that type of thing. That'll probably be first. I don't know all the intricacies. We've got a lot going on. It's hard to remember the exact things. I do know it raised my eyebrows when they talked about that kind of money.
Right.
But if the people are willing to vote for a bond issue, that's really the only way you could afford something like that.
Right.
And of course, our people do a good job of meshing that need into the other needs that we have and prioritizing them and pacing those bond offerings in line with our repayment schedule so that we retain a solid financial footing.
Right. Well, you can only run bonds under North Carolina law in even numbered years.
That's right.
There's not going to be a bond on the March 5th primary ballot. Is there a chance that there would be a parks bond on the November general election ballot for Johnston County?
I'm not sure. The commissioners hadn't made that decision yet. There's been a lot of requests having to do with not only school needs, but JCC, the college needs.
Right.
And we're looking at all of that and, again, trying to prioritize it within the financial framework that we're forced to deal with.
Do you support building JCC, a new campus in Clayton, in the land that the railroad gave there at 42 and 70, that also I think Novo may have had some ownership in too?
I can't say that I support that because from what I understand, the cost to develop that land because of the nature of the soil would be prohibitive. I'm not against them getting a Clayton campus. I think the college does a great job and can do a better job offering what kids need to get ahead in life. Not everybody needs a 4-year college
Right.
experience. And I've seen from my own family, I had a nephew that graduated second in his class in high school, got a scholarship, full ride. But when he got out with a chemical degree, he wanted to go to work at Grifols. Well, he needed to go to JCC to get a lab certificate.
Right. And for everybody that doesn't know, I don't think Grifols or Novo cares what degree you have. Almost everybody to go to work there has to go take the Intro to Bioworks class, which is a 1-semester class that is similar to a high school chemistry class that talks about what they do in the manufacturing process and the clean suits they wear. I mean, they look like astronauts and they have to go through air chambers and all that because they're making injectables that are in IV bags and it has to be completely clean because you don't want anything to get in those IV bags that gets injected into you. And that's one of the programs that they offer there at the Workforce Development Center in Clayton. And that's a tremendous thing. And if you go do 1 semester there, I think it meets a couple of nights a week. The last time I saw it cost like $500. It really wasn't that expensive. And you could go get a job at Grifols and Novo. And I mean, they pay $25, $30 an hour for just about anything there. Yeah. I mean, so they really, and they're always looking to hire people. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking about changing careers, think about going and calling JCC and looking about getting into Bioworks. Yeah. So you don't know if there'll be a parks bond in 2024.
I don't,
because there's other parks needs other than this one park. Right. There's the Mountains to the Sea Trail. There's stuff like that. But I was just curious because I've never seen get a straight answer as I talk to commissioners is, will we have it this year or not?
Yeah, I don't know yet. I'd have to defer. I'm only one of those 7 guys. But in listening to your previous podcast with our Parks Recreation Director, Adrian O'Neill, who does a great job, we were most fortunate to get him. I don't know how. There's other things that come into play. For example, the open space fund that he talked about. How will that be impacted by our land use plan when we adjust those ordinances? I don't know if that'll stimulate that or slow it down. All of that would factor into the monies available that we've been used to having available.
Right.
But to get to that point, I think we're going to have some type of bond issue. But it may need to be broader than just there in Cleveland. That's important because we've identified a site and a plan.
Right.
But there's other areas in the county that might need similar attention.
Right. What about going back to the sort of fire tax type plan that got promoted a few years ago? You were on the board when they had the meetings out here at Cleveland High School where they were going to create a 4-cent tax for the Cleveland Township out here. And it would follow the fire tax district, and the fire taxes, whatever it is, 8 or 9 cents. Right. I don't know exactly what it is, but that would be used to build this park. I mean, it's a different version of the park, but a park in this community where the citizens here would actually pay for it and maybe not the rest of the citizens in the county.
Yeah, we got some good feedback from that meeting, and I was in favor of going forward and allowing the citizens to vote on that.
Right.
If the people in that area wanted to vote on it and experience that tax increase and experience the park, great. I was all for that. I wasn't necessarily in favor of us arbitrarily putting it in place when I knew there was a lot of opposition against it.
Right. Well, and then we find out that the law is you can't really put that to a vote.
That's right.
that wasn't something that could actually be voted on.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think, I'm just happy that the land got preserved. I'm happy that Michael Knott and Denton Lee and Scott Janes, bought that land as private citizens and sort of held it till the county could get the grants and buy it. We're very fortunate. I've talked about being on the first call. I went to Rick Hester's office and him and I called the lady that owned the land because she was trying to give the county the 13 acres across the street. Yeah. And I'd been out there to look at it and Rick had been out there to look at it. And we were like, it's not level and it's full of stumps and but we knew she had the other one. And I was like, and I just asked her, and I was like, would you be willing to consider selling us the 80 acres on this side of the street? And she said, well, maybe. And that, the rest is kind of history. And so she did. And, we were fortunate to get that. And I think it's going to be great. It may not get built in the next 5 years, but I think it will get done. And they're going to redo the main GCA campus across from the fire department as part of that entire process. But it's going to take some time.
And I think it's a good starting point that may duplicate itself in other parts of the county, because there's a lot of other parts that are growing.
Right. Well, so what? We're starting to run out of time. I could talk to Ted Godwin for hours. But what has you excited about moving forward here? I mean, you're running for another 4-year term. What has you excited? Why do you want to do this? What is you excited about Johnston County?
Well, I'd really like to see. We've worked hard on this land use plan, and while I understand, having been a banker, I understand the need for growth, but also grew up here, and I'd sure like to see it preserved as much as possible. But I'd like to see that land use plan really come to fruition through some good, solid, meaningful, I don't know how to say it best, but managed growth.
Right.
Some people say when you say managed growth, that translates into stopping growth.
Right.
But I think there's ways that we can compromise and bring about a suitable end that everybody can live with good and feel good about it.
Okay. All right. Well, that's cool. And I guess the last question I'll ask you is, you've been here your whole life. You raised your family. You've been an elected official for 12 years. What do you love most about Johnston County?
That's easy. The people here. Not, we've got a culture here. I've lived in maybe I shouldn't say this in Johnston, high Yankee areas. I lived in the Pinehurst area a while, and the people here don't adhere to that P word, pushy.
Right.
People in Johnston County are just good people.
Right.
And we've developed a culture, and the people that come here, and we've got a lot of people that come here from other places, they fall into that culture.
Right.
And I'm just love being here.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. So if people want to learn more about you and I guess your campaign, how do they reach out to you?
Well, I don't have a campaign spot, but I do have a Facebook,
Okay.
Ted Godwin for Johnston County Commissioner Facebook page.
All right. Well, that's cool. All right. Well, we'll thank Ted Godwin for coming in and being our guest today on the Best of Johnston County podcast. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, if you do us the favor of liking or following or subscribing to this podcast, wherever you are seeing it, whether it be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or if you're seeing any of the links on TikTok or Instagram or the Breeden Law social media pages, so that you'll be aware of future episodes of the Best of Johnston County podcast. There are new episodes are put up every Monday. So every Monday, come back and look and see which guests we have that week. I think you will find the guests that we've had, if you go back and listen to some of the ones previously and the ones coming up, to be very interesting. If you love Johnston County as much as I love Johnston County, this is the podcast for you. So till next time, I'm your host, Jonathan Breeden. Thanks a lot.
That's the end of today's episode of Best of Johnston County, a show brought to you by the trusted team at Breeden Law Office. We thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to sharing more interesting facets of this community next week. Every story, every viewpoint adds another thread to the rich tapestry of Johnston County. If the legal aspects highlighted raise some questions, help is just around the corner at www.breedenfirm.com.